Welcome to From Shadows to the Block, a collection where the characters don't just exist, they breathe, they fight, and they survive. If they're lucky.
4th Street Live. A short story by Brian Eldridge Sr. 2026. The bass from the stage didn't just vibrate the concrete of 4th Street Live. It rattled the bones of everyone standing on it. Throngs of people swayed, bounced, and moved to their own rhythm as the music washed over their sun-bathed bodies. Reginald Morgan stood on the VIP balcony, looking down at the sea of bodies. MNS Records had outdone themselves. The lighting rig illuminated the crowd in hues of deep purple and gold. To most of Louisville, it was a celebration of music and culture. To Reginald, it was the culmination of months of hard work. Down on the stage, the music faded and the crowd roared as the host bounded out from the wings.
Louisville, are we feeling alive tonight?
Mina Charles screamed into her microphone, her voice perfectly modulated for broadcast. Her stunning dark chocolate skin shimmered enough to rival the sequined silver dress she adorned. Her big bright eyes and glowing smile could be seen from the West End. "They can't hear you, Mina," Lance Forrest shouted, throwing an arm around her waist. "I said, are y'all ready for the main event?" Lance wore a plum suit with a purple rose pinned to the black lapels. His mirror shades let the audience see what he saw. They were a beautiful, lively crowd. The crowd erupted. Lance and Mina, the city's golden couple of the internet age, beamed at each other. They were perfect, polished, and as soon as the lights dimmed for the next act, they dropped their smiles like heavy stones.
Laying it on thick there, Lanny. Mina scowled.
Lance scoffed as they stepped onto the privacy of the covered sidewalk. "Thick as those ankles," he snapped. "Or should I say cankles?" Lance laughed and pointed as Mina punched him in the arm and groaned before walking to their dressing room. In the center of the crowd, Sydney Castile Bennett adjusted her cardigan, feeling out of place amidst the crop tops and clouds of nondescript smoke. She held tightly to her husband's arm. Sydney rarely went to events like this unless it was Fred Hammond or Yolanda Adams. The amount of cursing, the half-naked women, and the shirtless, tattooed men made her uncomfortable. "You okay?" her husband Will asked, his eyes scanning the perimeter out of habit. He saw exits. He saw pockets that were too loose. The familiar tingle in his hands never fully left. Shiny watches, dangling car keys with European logos, glossy new cell phones. 5 years ago, Will would have stolen this crowd blind. Today, he just wanted to have some fun with his wife.
I'm fine, Sydney lied. Just loud.
Will squeezed her hand and leaned in to kiss her cheek. "Will?" The voice was high, eager, and far too familiar. Will slouched briefly before recovering as he saw Gabrielle weaving through the crowd. Her honey blonde lace front wig stuck out like Eminem in a Wu-Tang video. She was dressed to kill. Leather skirt, heels high enough to be a weapon, and a look in her eyes that said one thing: prowling.
I didn't know you guys were coming, Gabrielle said, ignoring Sydney entirely to lean in for a hug with Will. She held on a beat too long, her hands lingering on his biceps.
Will gently but firmly peeled her off, but she reached out and gave him an extra squeeze on the arm with her dagger-sharp nails. "Hey, Gabby. Yeah, Reginald gave us passes."
You look good. Rugged. Gabrielle purred.
Sydney cleared her throat. It wasn't a cough. It was her way of saying, "Stop, bitch." "Hello, Gabrielle." Gabrielle's eyes flickered to Sydney, dimming instantly.
Oh, hey, Sydney. Cute sweater.
She said it like a slur. She looked back at Will, waiting for a spark that wasn't there. When Will turned his attention to the stage, Gabrielle scoffed, flipped her hair, and spun on her heel.
Boring. See ya, she said, sucking her teeth.
She disappeared into the throng, her radar already pinging for a new target. She didn't have to look far. Near the VIP rope line stood a man in a tailored suit that cost more than Will's truck. Kason Swift. To Gabrielle, he looked important but approachable. He was texting with a huge grin across his face, his head bobbing to the pounding bass line coming from the stage. Gabrielle smoothed her hair and slid up beside him.
You look like you're waiting for someone who isn't coming, she said, leaning against the barricade.
Kason turned, and his amused smile turned into something more genuine when he saw her. just waiting on a pretzel, but the view just improved. He looked her up and down, licking his lips slowly.
Gabrielle giggled, touching his arm. I'm Gabrielle.
Kaysen, he said, leaving out his famous last name. Gabrielle stared for a second, a hint of recognition in her eyes as she turned her head to the side.
Kaysen, I think I know you from somewhere, she said, her smile spreading across her light brown lips. Here you go, babe. No pretzels left.
Courtney McGee appeared, holding a paper boat of nachos and 2 waters. She stopped, her eyes darting from Kaysen's hand on the barricade to Gabrielle's hand near Kaysen's elbow. Kaysen recoiled as his heart stuck in his throat. He stepped back from Gabrielle as if she were powdered with anthrax. Oh, hey, thanks, Court. He didn't introduce them. He looked over Gabrielle's head, pointing a long finger across her shoulder. The line to the bathroom is bananas. You might as well go home, he said. Courtney wasn't stupid. She worked in corporate law. She knew what a lie looked like. She glared at Gabrielle, and her lips tightened.
Yeah, if you need to go, you better go now.
Gabrielle rolled her eyes. She gave Kaysen another quick glance. He was handsome. His wide nose was perfectly symmetrical, and his thick lips were perfect for long kisses.
Court is lucky, or maybe she isn't, Gabrielle thought as she moved back into the crowd.
Perched near the sound tent, Detective Malcolm West wasn't watching the show. Hip-hop wasn't his brand of music. He was definitely more of a Sly and the Family Stone or Jimi Hendrix fan. He could even get down with the emotions if he was in the mood. But today wasn't that kind of day. He was watching hands. He was watching waistbands. Reginald's first annual top-tier event brought out people from every corner of Louisville. It was catnip to his cop sensibilities.
You're doing it again, Emma Loving said softly. She placed a hand on his chest, her touch a grounding wire. You're off the clock, Deke.
Malcolm gave her a gentle side eye and hooked her hips. You are blessed with something none of us can comprehend, and you literally can't turn it off. There's no telling what you're seeing out there right now, Malcolm said with a chuckle, running his hands through her long silver braids. Emma cocked her head to the side before looking up into Malcolm's face. She gave him a glowing smile.
This is true, but I've had years of practice, she said, noticing him still scanning the area.
Me too. And I see 3 warrants and 2 parole violations just in this section, Em, Malcolm grumbled, though he leaned into her touch. And look over there. He nodded toward the side of the stage. Jamal Freeman, Dwayne Clemens' right hand, was standing near a stack of speakers. He wasn't moving to the music. He stood too close to the man in front of him. They exchanged dead-eyed looks before a brief handshake. Clemens is bold, Malcolm muttered, making deals right in front of all these people.
Let it go for tonight, Emma whispered, touching his cheek and guiding his gaze back to her.
I can't, because he got unfriendly eyes on him. Malcolm pointed a discreet finger towards a tall, unfamiliar man leaning against a pillar 20 feet away from Jamal. The man was handsome, wearing a thin leather jacket despite the heat, watching Jamal with the intensity of a predator. Emma tried not to stare too hard. She didn't want to see too much.
I don't like his body language. Who is he?
Not sure, Malcolm said, his eyes narrowing, but he ain't from here. He has a different look than our Louisville boys. Backstage, Will and Sidney were walking toward the green room when they ran into Reginald. He greeted them warmly, clearly excited about the event he had put together. The landscaping at the crib looks incredible, Will, Reginald said, shaking his hand. Seriously, the hydrangeas at the house, Yvonne loves them. Just doing the job, Reg, Will said, relaxing. This was the one place he felt useful. I'm going to get you over to the hill to hook up some of the shrubs on the side, maybe some decorative stuff out back, Reginald said, his hand on Will's shoulder. Hell yeah, Will said, a grin growing under his thin beard. Sidney wasn't listening. She was watching a separate show playing out backstage. Lance and Mina were standing near the stage exit. Lance was gesturing wildly, his face twisted in a snarl. Mina was looking at her phone, holding a finger up to him dismissively. I don't care about your brand deals, Mina. You're embarrassing me, Lance growled.
Then leave, Mina shot back. Go find someone who cares.
Lance stormed off toward the basketball booth, leaving Mina standing there, her arm hanging limp with her phone in her hand. Sydney watched as Mina wiped her face, took a deep breath, and forced the smile back on before walking toward the parking lot exit. Sydney felt a warm hand on her shoulder, and then Will's body lean into hers. He leaned his head over and smiled. "What you see back there?"
Nothing, Sydney said, turning back. Just show business.
At the basketball booth, Lance was aggressively throwing balls at the rim, missing every shot. People standing around him were jeering loudly as he relentlessly shot ball after ball. "You keep missing because you forgot to yell Kobe," a voice said. Lance turned. Gabrielle was standing there holding a drink, looking him up and down. "Off night," Lance muttered.
I can make it better, she said, stepping into his space. I'm Gabrielle, and I've seen your show. You're much cuter in living color.
Lance got an eyeful and took a step back from the basketball game. His eyes went from head to toe and back again. She was young and looking at him like he was a king, exactly what his ego needed. "Lance," he said, the charm turning back on. "Let me get your number. We can discuss what happens in front of a camera." Gabrielle's eyes tightened seductively, and she held her phone out and thumbed it to unlock.
Let's trade phones.
Lance reached into his pocket so they could exchange phones, never taking his eyes off her chest except to look at her neck. He admired the small, intricate tattoo design where her neck and shoulder collided. Gabrielle felt a jolt of excitement. She was about to exchange numbers with a literal superstar. Sure, he had an equally, if not more celebrated girlfriend, who was oddly not in the vicinity. She looked around to see if Mina was nearby.
Where's your girl? She asked.
Lance shook his head and stepped closer as he returned her phone. "She's around, doing her own shit. So I gotta do mine," he said. Gabrielle put a hand on her hip and gave him a half smile.
So, you're not monogamous?
Lance closed in the rest of the space between them. Gabrielle could smell the cinnamon in his breath over the smell of the corndog booth 20 feet away. She looked up at his face and then put her hand softly on the purple rose on his lapel.
I'm just making sure. I don't want to beat her ass if I don't need to.
Gabrielle wasn't afraid to fight over a man, but only if the man was hers. Lance wasn't hers, yet. Maybe this was her shot to get a piece of the pie. Lance kissed her cheek softly and walked back towards the stage, leaving Gabrielle breathless. She put a hand over her chest and smoothed her clothes before strutting away. 50 feet away, Jamal Freeman wrapped up his deal and turned to leave. Before he could take 5 steps, he found his path blocked by the man in the leather jacket. He looked up into the man's cold, dark eyes. The man gave a twisted smile. "You Jamal, right? Dwayne's nigga?" Jamal's hand drifted toward his waistband. "Who's asking?" Jamal said, shifting his weight from side to side. "Just a nigga trying to get like you. Like Dwayne," he said, as his eyes crossed the crowd to Reginald. "Like that nigga over there." Jamal cut his eyes to Reginald, and then they bounced back. "Except I ain't trying to get capped, so maybe not like Reggie," he continued. Jamal took another step forward, his eyes tight, scowl deepening. He pressed his finger into the soft leather of the man's jacket. "I know you. You that Hoptown bruv French," he said, snapping his finger. French licked his lips and crossed his arms, flexing his physique through his jacket. "You in the wrong city, French," Jamal said, his voice low. "And you standing in the wrong spot." French laughed. "Nah, Gully, I'm just enjoying the sights. The music." He looked past Jamal and saw Gabrielle walking away from the basketball booth, checking her phone. "And the women. Louisville has some exceptional talent. Country fine hoes up here." "Keep walking," Jamal warned. "Aight then," French said. He winked, stepped around Jamal, and picked up his pace to catch up to Gabrielle. Gabrielle felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see French. He had a scar near his eyebrow and a swagger that made Lance look like a boy. "You look like you're looking for trouble," French said, his voice low and gravelly. This was the first man who had approached her that day, who she even found a mild interest in. Definitely not the kind her dad would like her to bring home, but that was part of the thrill. She smiled.
Maybe I am.
He stuck out his hand, and she met it with hers. He shook her hand softly, admiring her claws. "I'm Trouble. And you are?" She laughed out loud, covering her mouth as she bellowed. Nah, don't cover that beautiful smile, he said, gently touching the tip of her chin. She moved her hand and held the smile.
Hi, Trouble, she said with a giggle.
Let's get a drink. Somewhere quiet, French said. Courtney had been looking for Kaysen for 20 minutes. He said he was going to check on the car. She walked past the porta potties holding her stomach. She had a bad feeling. Their vibe had been different since he went back to the restaurant, and she stayed at the firm. She assumed it had just been their change in schedules and his responsibilities as assistant GM at Swift's neighborhood restaurant. But she was convinced he was different, and she needed to know why. And where was her Kaysen? But maybe it was all in her head. Was he different, or was it her that had changed?
I just need to clear the air, she whispered as she approached the rows of vehicles.
She walked into the VIP parking lot off 6th Street. She could still hear the subtle thumping of the music, but another rhythmic sound countered the music. She spotted Kaysen's white SUV, the engine running. She sped up her stride as she approached. When Courtney walked up to the passenger side, ready to apologize for being paranoid, her biggest fear came true. The windows weren't tinted enough. She caught an eyeful of Mina Charles and Kaysen in the back seat. Kaysen was passionately gnawing at her while her mouth hung agape. Courtney didn't scream. She didn't bang on the glass. She only felt something warm inside her core begin to cool. She forced her fingers to spread before tightening them into a fist. With a deep, calming breath, she turned and walked back to the party. 15 minutes later on stage, the lights came up. Lance stood center stage. Give it up for that last set. Mina trotted out from the wings. Her hair was slightly frazzled, her lipstick smudged at the corner, but her energy was on 11, high voltage.
Incredible, she screamed, grabbing Lance's arm.
Lance looked at her. He saw the smudge. He knew exactly where she had been. He looked out at the crowd, then remembered the new phone number in his phone. He smiled. Let's keep this party going. Los Diablos Polos on the corner was half empty. French and Gabrielle sat in a booth by the window, a plate of untouched appetizers between them.
So you're not from here? Gabrielle asked, twirling her straw.
I'm from Hoptown, French said, leaning in, but I think I might stay here a while. There's a lot of opportunity. Gabrielle matched his lean.
I ain't no Hoptown maid'em like you, she grinned.
Nah, I'm 101. God broke the motherfucking mold when he finished me, he said. Gabrielle laughed again, deep and loud, but she didn't cover her smile and she met his gaze with one of her own.
I see, she said, taking a sip of her beverage. Why they call you French? She asked with a smile.
French sighed and looked around. He laughed humorlessly. My name is Francis, he said. Gabrielle started to laugh, but then held it in before it overcame her. French fought the urge to laugh. He liked seeing her smile. Don't laugh, he said as he broke out in his own humored sound. She slowly turned and looked outside the window just as she heard the sound. Tap, tap, tap. French looked at the window. Jamal was standing on the sidewalk. Behind him were two other men. Jamal wasn't smiling. He raised a black Glock. French didn't hesitate. Down! He grabbed Gabrielle by the neck and threw her to the floor just as the window exploded. Glass and food burst into an explosion everywhere. The noise was disorienting and deafening. Crack, crack, crack. Glass and food burst into an explosion everywhere. The noise was disorienting and deafening. Patrons screamed. French rolled onto his back, pulling a chrome handgun from his ankle holster. He fired 3 shots blindly over the booth. Pop, pop, pop. Outside, Jamal ducked behind a planter. Sirens wailed in the distance. The police presence at the concert was massive. They would be here in seconds. Jamal and the 2 other men shot off on foot down the sidewalk. French looked at Gabrielle. She was covered in glass, shaking, breathing hard, but her eyes were wide. She wasn't crying. She was exhilarated. You good? He asked, looking at the carnage around him.
Yeah, she said breathlessly, fighting back an uneasy smile.
I can't get caught with this, French hissed, holding up the gun. I have a record.
Gabrielle looked at the gun. Then she looked at her oversized purse. Give it to me.
French stared at her, unsure of what to make of her offer. What?
Give it to me. She snatched the hot weapon and shoved it deep into her bag, under her makeup kit. Run!
French looked at her with a new kind of respect. He grabbed her face, kissed her hard, and bolted toward the kitchen exit. He stopped at the door and turned back. I'm gonna find you, Gabs, he said sternly, before turning to run. Gabrielle sighed and then brushed herself off, before standing to her feet. Minutes later, the blue lights washed over the shambles of the restaurant.
Daddy, I don't know, Gabrielle sobbed, burying her face in Malcolm's chest. I was just eating. And then, shots. Everywhere.
Malcolm held her tight, his heart hammering against his ribs. Did you see who it was? Gabrielle pulled back, wiping her eyes.
No, just some nig. She stopped herself. Some around the way dudes. They were shooting at some guy.
Where is the guy?
He ran. She lied smoothly. I think he was scared.
Malcolm looked at the shattered window. He remembered Jamal. He remembered the look on Jamal's face earlier. He also remembered the man watching Jamal like a hawk. Dwayne, Malcolm whispered. The name was a bitter flavor on his tongue. He looked at his shaking daughter. I'm going to burn their whole world down. Outside the police cordon, the WHTT news van had set up. The camera light flicked on. The reporter turned to the witnesses. We're here with Lance Forrest and Mina Charles, who were nearby when the chaos broke out. You two are shaken up? Mina clung to Lance, burying her face in his shoulder, trembling theatrically.
It was just so loud. We just wanted to bring love to the city, and then this happens?
Lance wrapped his arms around her, looking deep into the camera lens with practiced sincerity. We're just blessed to be alive. You realize what's important in moments like this. He looked down at Mina, the woman he knew had just cheated on him, the woman he despised. I'm just glad I didn't lose the love of my life.
Mina looked up, eyes glistening with fake tears. I love you, baby.
They kissed for the cameras. Behind them, the ambulance lights turned the broken glass on the sidewalk into a kaleidoscope of red and blue. The brakes on Will's red Honda squeaked softly as he pulled into the parking space in front of he and Sydney's Fern Creek apartment. Sydney's head leaned softly against the window, her eyes closed tight. Will watched her chest rise and fall slowly, the tiny gold cross on her chain glistening in the moonlight. Will stared a moment more before he reached to touch her forearm softly to awaken his wife. His phone vibrated before he touched her. It was his cousin Nick. Will's heart leapt into his throat for a moment and he swallowed hard. He looked at Sydney again before answering the phone. Nick, he said, with all the excitement of a tax audit. Lil' cuz, Nick's voice blasted raggedly through the speakerphone. Will turned the volume down a little, looking at Sydney, hoping she was still asleep. I got a mark. I know you said you out and all, but sharing is caring, he joked. Will propped his hand on the steering wheel and stared into the apartment directly in front of the parking space. He could see over the patio and right into the living room of his neighbors. He saw a laptop, a flat-screen TV, and a pair of fresh Jordans all in his line of sight. Will rubbed his thumb and index fingers together and breathed deeply. It would be so damn easy, he thought. He looked back at Sydney and felt a warm sensation layer itself over him. I'm good, cuz. I got my own thing going on now. Be careful, Will said. Nick groaned into a gruff chuckle. Cyrus said this is some real shit. Respect, though. You your own man, Nick said. Later, bro, Will said. The call disconnected and Will closed his eyes tight and exhaled.
I love you, Sydney said softly, her Dominican accent appearing in her half-asleep state.
Will opened his eyes and gazed through the moonlit dark at his wife. Her smile beamed through the car. You're awake? I believe in you, Will. I will always believe in you, she said. The two leaned toward each other and kissed long and slow. At the Hill, Reginald sat in his office. Slice's Just One Hit rattled the speakers. A glass of Bro Bro's bourbon sat half-finished on his desk. Reginald tapped his index finger on the hardwood desk impatiently. His office door swung open and Jamal strutted in, his chest sticking out and a big grin plastered across his face. Nigga, Reginald growled, sit your black ass down. Reginald pointed at the chair in front of him. You ain't my boss, pretty boy. I take my orders from Jamal started before being cut off by a disembodied voice on the speakerphone. Me? Motherfucker. Jamal's eyes opened wide and his mouth dropped. He tiptoed slowly to the desk and sat down. Yo, D, I didn't know you were on the line, Hefe. Dwayne released a sharp breath as the phone rattled. You shooting at Reggie's festival? Jamal looked at Reginald and then back at the phone. Dwayne was in federal prison and Jamal still felt the urge to wet his pants. This nigga named French showed up flexing. We had to send a message, Jamal said. Reginald leaned back in his seat and tossed back the last of his bourbon. He spun the glass around on the desk and stood up to pace the room. Did you get him? Dwayne asked. Jamal looked at his hands. His fingers shook and he could feel his heartbeat pounding rapidly. No, he got away and the cops came, he said. Reginald leaned over the desk and looked down at Jamal. You know where he's from? Hopkinsville, Jamal said. Dwayne laughed out loud with a deep, bellowing laugh. I got somebody there. Y'all man up and watch out for him. Put the word out to bring him in untouched. We putting him on the hot seat, Dwayne said as the call dropped. Jamal looked at Reginald, his mouth open with an unsaid question. Ask around about Sean Colston, Reginald said, standing up straight and grabbing his glass for a refill. Jamal sat back in the chair, his body contorted awkwardly, his face white as a ghost. At Malcolm's Algonquin home, he sat quietly in the dim kitchen. His fingers were steepled in front of his face. His mind raced as he contemplated how close he came to losing his daughter. He knew Dwayne was in prison, but he felt like Dwayne was responsible for every action of his organization. It was no coincidence that Jamal was being watched by some random outsider just a couple hours before a shooting. His eyes opened and he exhaled as he felt warm hands on his tight shoulders.
I checked on Gabby, Emma said.
She okay? Malcolm whispered.
Yeah, I'm surprised at how resilient she is, Emma said, as she found herself a seat beside Malcolm.
She put her hand on his knee and gently rubbed it. She's tough. Always has been, he said, still staring straight ahead. Emma leaned back and crossed her arms across her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but she hesitated. Malcolm didn't like the hesitation. Emma didn't hold her tongue. What is it? Emma blinked a couple times and then looked away. She cleared her throat to give herself another moment to figure out how to say what she was thinking.
I don't think she is telling us everything, Emma said. I'm not going to cheat and find out on my own. That's an invasion of her privacy, but you should talk to her.
Malcolm knew he should trust Emma's gut. She didn't speak on things if her reasoning wasn't sharp. Her intuition and her abilities worked hand in hand. I will, he said. He kneaded his hands nervously. He wanted to get up and do something this minute, but he knew that being hasty could make things worse. All I know is we're making sure Dwayne never gets out of prison. This is all on him, and everybody in his orbit needs to pay, Malcolm said, his eyes hard and angry. Gabrielle was standing at the door trying to listen to her father and Emma discuss the events of the evening. She wanted to know what they knew and what they suspected.
Can't hide nothing from Emma, Gabrielle said softly. She just knows.
Gabrielle shook her head and walked over to the bed. She flopped back and let the weight of the day float away. She reached into her bag and pulled out her vape pen. After taking several long tokes and blowing the lemony flavor all over the room, she reached into the purse again and pulled out French's gun. She laid flat on the bed again, the gun between her face and the ceiling. She admired the weight of the steel killing machine in her dainty hand.
Francis, she chuckled, thinking of her new friend. Thank you for walking these streets with me. From shadows to the block is a world woven from these lives and desperate moments. None of them exist alone. Every story here echoes into the next. I'll see you in the shadows.